Hey friends, thank you so much for joining me on our Journey Toward Hope devotional. I'm recording in a slightly different setting, and so there are going to be all kinds of new extra noises. I'm also hanging out with my man Kylo, our chocolate lab, so he may show up in the frame somewhere, licking my elbow or hanging out with us. So if you see him, that's his name. And also my neighbor's rooster really likes to talk, apparently in the afternoon. I first need to apologize for no video last week. We were out of town celebrating Jessica's birthday, and we thought we would get around to making a video, and then schedule just didn't allow it, and I thought it was okay to take a week off to celebrate her. So there's some more that goes into that, and there's another video that I'll probably be making later to explain that a little bit more, but not necessarily in this series. So I want us to jump in and really kind of cover in hopefully a short amount of time in this video, last week and this week. Now, we've been journeying through the Bible, looking at stories that inspire hope, and we had gotten to the last plague of God leading the Israelites out of Egypt. The final plague, the 10th plague, the death of the firstborn. And God had given Moses very specific instructions to go and warn Pharaoh that bad things were going to happen if he didn't let the people go. And basically Pharaoh was done at this point. 9 plagues have happened. Pharaoh just sent them away and said, "I don't want to ever see you again." And so God gives the Israelites, through Moses, a very clear set of rules. They're to take a perfect spotless lamb that's about a year old and to kill it, drain the blood, cook the meat, and then take the blood and paint it on the door frames and across the top of the door, so basically covering their door frame, and then cook the meat and have it ready to eat, to take with them, and then also make loaves of bread without yeast, without leaven, so that it wouldn't rise, so they could grab it and take off quickly, basically telling the Israelites, be ready, I'm coming, you need to be ready for it. And then the Spirit of the Lord comes through Egypt. It passes over all of the Israelite families and only strikes the Egyptian families, killing the firstborn of every living thing, animal and human alike. Now, it's important in this story to remember that God passed over the Israelites not because the Israelites were perfect, not because the Israelites were better than the Egyptians, but because God chose the Israelites to be his people, and he gave them the instruction on what to do, and they obeyed it. If any of the Israelites had not followed these rules, then they wouldn't have been passed over. So there's a cautionary tale in this. If God tells you to do something, we need to be obedient because it could mean life or death. There's the challenge there to listen to God and to be obedient to him. God obviously speaks to the Israelites, not to the Egyptians, and what ends up happening? After the firstborn are all dead, God grants the Israelites freedom. Pharaoh finally says, get out of here, leave. I don't want you around anymore. You've done enough. Your God has done enough. I want you out of Egypt. And so he sends them away. They are finally granted their freedom, right? So how does this connect to Easter? Well, Easter and Passover happen at roughly the same time each year, and obviously it's not spot on. However, this year, Good Friday and Easter, or Good Friday and Passover both were on the same day. Passover is a 7-day festival, while Easter is really just Sunday, and Good Friday, or the day that Jesus died, is that Friday. And there's always that kind of limbo in the middle, so it's kind of a weekend-long celebration. But these two things go together for several reasons. One, the Passover celebration was the reason that Jesus gathered his disciples together and had the Last Supper. That meal was in unison with the Passover celebration that was going on at that time. So him gathering his brothers, his disciples together and having the conversation about Passover and about what God had done and how he had set his people free from the slavery of Egypt, that all plays into what Jesus is about to do. We know that the timeline of Easter is that Jesus came into town, Jesus made himself known, taught, shared, encouraged people, and then gathered his disciples for a meal, shared the meal, shared the bread and the wine, which we'll get to in a minute, and then went and prayed in the garden. While he was there in the garden, that's when Judas betrayed him and brought the soldiers to the garden to arrest Jesus, drag him off to multiple trials, which then resulted in him being crucified on Golgotha with 2 thieves. That whole series of events have a lot of parallels that go along with this. Jesus, he was born in Bethlehem, the source at that time of the most perfect, spotless lamb, the birthplace of David, where he raised lambs, the perfection of what a sacrifice was, that was started way back in the Old Testament, of a perfect, spotless lamb being what needed to atone for sin. Something had to die. Blood had to be spilled for sin to be wiped away. A lamb for the Israelites during the Passover was enough to cover a household, or even a household and some more if it needed to. Jesus' sacrifice of himself, his blood, was enough to cover all sin. This is important. The bread that he broke as a symbol of his body being broke was the unleavened bread that the Israelites were told to make and have ready to go, to take with them so that they could have nourishment on the way, being prepared. The grape juice, or the blood, again, is a symbol of the lamb's blood. All of these things in the Passover story granted the Israelites protection from death, protection from God's Spirit coming and eradicating those who stood in opposition to God. Jesus' death protects us from the ultimate punishment that we deserve for our sin. He gave us a freedom from slavery, not necessarily slavery to Egypt like the Israelites, but instead a freedom from sin, a freedom from our own choices, from the punishment that we deserve for what we do. All of these things fit together so perfectly that we see the events of Passover and Jesus, the story of Jesus, being woven through the middle of it, that God loved his people so much that he would provide them a way, not by their own means, not because they were good enough, but because of what he was willing to do. He gave them a substitute, something that could spill its blood and to pay for the sin so that they didn't come under the punishment or the wrath of God. He gave us Jesus. He gave us himself so that he could die on the cross so that we wouldn't have to face that. All of this linking together leads us to the celebration of Easter, where with the Israelites in Egypt, there was not a couple days later where, well, the lamb is back alive. Instead, they were freed and got to go into the promised land, or, well, technically across the Red Sea into the wilderness to the edge of the promised land, but we'll get to that later. But for us, for Jesus providing us a way, if God had just died and that was the end of it, he paid for our sin and his blood was enough and that's it, then it would have proven that there was one thing stronger than God: death. It would have proven that he really wasn't king over all. But Jesus didn't stay dead. Jesus sacrificed himself and then 3 days later rose from the dead. He proved that he was bigger than anything on this planet, including most of our greatest fear, death. He proved that he could provide us a way even through the biggest challenge that we by no means can overcome. And so, by doing so, he gives us a hope that surpasses anything this world could offer. It surpasses us more than sacrificing a lamb and painting our door frames. He has done all of the work to provide us a way to be saved if we will just believe and trust in him. And on that Easter Sunday, when the women went to redress his body and to do the ceremonial things that they were planning to do, and they walk up on that tomb and it is empty and Jesus is not there. He is free, and the angel informs them he's not here. He's gone. He's come back to life. That feeling, that excitement of the fact that God, who did something no one has ever done for any of us, dying for us and forgiving our sin, providing us a way to go to heaven, that event in response, that hope-building event, can't be matched by anything. And that is what we celebrate on Easter. The beautiful thing that ties into all of this It has nothing to do with what we do, what we're able to do. We cannot make up for our mistakes, our sin. We can turn to God, we can be obedient to Him, we can follow His truths the best way we know how, but at some point, we're going to fail. We fail early on. Even as children, we fail. God's grace, God's love for us, God's willing to sacrifice Himself for us to make up for where we can't, that is the ultimate hope, that we don't have to do it because we can't. So many people today are just stricken by this idea that they're not good enough. They can't do it enough. They've done too many bad things. They can't come back from this. Why would God love them? I'm here to tell you, if you are watching this, if you're hearing this and you are desperate for hope, God did it for you. God sacrificed Himself, was willing to endure a cross and punishment and shame and all the awful things that happened to Him because He loves you and because He wanted to give you freedom. Freedom from a slavery, freedom from the punishment of our bad choices. And all He asks in return is for us to turn our lives to Him, to say, God, you know better than I do. Lead me, guide me, show me what you would have me do. And out of a humble, grateful, love-soaked heart, we chase after Him. And we're not going to be perfect at it. But in a good community of believers, we're going to encourage each other toward that. We're going to be with each other when we face those hard times. And we're going to keep pointing to Jesus, not ourselves, but to Jesus as the example of what that's supposed to look like. So I hope this Easter weekend, as you're praying and you're hopefully a part of a community of believers that's celebrating, that you would just have this weight lifted off of you, that you would be reminded that the punishment has been paid for. The sin has been forgiven. All God desires is a response. That you admit that He is better than your ways. He wants you to see Him as Lord, as King of your life. And if you're willing to submit to Him and believe and confess, you are saved. And you get to be a part of that family from now until the end of eternity, which last time I checked, there's no end to. And so that is the hope that we put into our hearts. That is the living hope that we desire and long for. So I hope if you don't already know that hope, that you would talk with somebody. If you need to message me, I would love to talk with you as well. But find somebody who is a believer and talk with them about that hope. How you get that hope. You don't have to do anything. Your world can be completely falling apart. You can think you've made all the worst choices, but I promise you today, if you're still breathing air, there is still a chance for you to know the saving grace and the hope that comes from following Jesus. Will you pray with me? God, we love you so much. And we thank you for this celebration weekend where we get to really focus on your sacrifice. We get to really focus on how much you love us and what you were willing to endure and go through. And then we get to celebrate that you didn't stay dead, that death did not beat you, that there is victory over death through you. God, I pray that would just swell up in us an inspiration and a joy and an excitement that would just keep us coming back to you, coming back to your word, coming back and doing the things you've challenged us to, because God, your ways are so much better than ours. Your ways are life-giving. Your ways are life-inspiring. Our ways, God, they distract us. They distract us from loving you and loving our fellow man. They're selfish, sadly. And so, God, I pray that we would be focused on your ways. We would focus on your love, and that we would be moved today to just worship you so completely. God, we love you. Thank you for this Easter weekend. We ask and pray this in Jesus' powerful name. Amen. Thank you all so much for tuning in this week. Hopefully, the animal sounds and local neighbors mowing wasn't too loud. I appreciate you all again for watching these, and watch for some different videos coming up soon. We have some things kind of planned, and so we're excited to get to share those. Love y'all all. Thank you so much for tuning in, and we'll see you next time.